You're no stranger to the Netherlands.
I'm not. I have family out here in Utrecht.
Yeah, you even sing about Utrecht.
I do, because it's funny.
This is what Neil sings about. Utrecht. And to prove it, she bisected 3 young tourists from Utrecht, which rapidly display a lot of guts.
That was mostly because Utrecht rhymes with vivisect and bisect. I mean, truthfully, it wasn't me going, I must get Utrecht in here. It was me going, it rhymes. But yeah, my wife is a wonderful singer named Amanda Palmer, and her sister Alison lives in Utrecht and married a very nice Dutch gentleman. So I'm practically Dutch now by marriage. It's terrifying.
And I hear your Dutch is improving.
It's terrible. It's at its best only if I'm hanging around with Alison, who's learning Dutch. So I get to sort of hear awkwardly spoken American accented Dutch. And I go, okay, yes, I can figure out what the words are. As opposed to, the normal thing where it's terrible being English and overhearing Dutch, because it sounds kind of English. And your head starts reconfiguring the words into English sentences that they aren't. And you create absent-mindedly giant nonsensical conversations. It's worse if you're drifting off to sleep. Like if you're in the back of a car and you go, okay, either these people are plotting a galactic invasion or I'm asleep. And probably it's a galactic invasion.
I think Fort Perfect is here somewhere. You're here, of course, because of the Dutch edition of your new book, The Ocean at the End of the Lane. And it's a special edition.
It is. It's incredibly beautiful. So in the UK, I think one of the things about Ocean at the End of the Lane that's really fun for me is that because my publishers like it a lot, they keep doing beautiful editions of it. And in the UK, they did an incredibly beautiful edition that was limited to, I think, 250 copies. And one of the things they included in the beautiful edition was pages from my original notebook. So you can see me writing the book, handwriting it. And when they came to design the Dutch edition, they'd seen this beautiful limited edition, and they decided to work it in. So it's the only edition that has this kind of stuff in it. Nobody else has this, and then there's one on the inside back cover as well. And it kind of goes off onto the book jacket, which shows either care or madness. And it sparkles. You have and I asked them about the sparkle. I said, you sparkle, and they said, only in the first edition. So if there are future editions, they will not sparkle. But no, it makes it really, an astonishingly beautiful photo. This photograph is me, age 7 years old, standing on a drain pipe at my house. And because after I finished writing the novel, which we haven't even spoken about, and probably should,
and we will.
And it contains a dramatic escape down that drain pipe. And I gave it to my sister, the novel, and she said, I have a photograph of you standing on that drain pipe. And she sent it to me. And it's an incredibly happy photo of me, age 7, just standing on the drain pipe going, and I showed it to my wife, who said, if you crop that just below the huge smile, that would be an incredibly sinister photo. And I tried it, and I went, you're right, it is. So I sent the incredibly sinister photo over to my publishers. It's true.
So this novel is about you.
Somebody in the interviews that I've been doing since I've been here has already asked me if this is the nearest thing to an autobiography that I will write. And I had to say, it is not an autobiography. It's a made-up story. But it is a made-up story essentially with me in it, or at least a 7-year-old version of me. Last January, my wife, Amanda, went to Melbourne, Australia to make an album. And I went to Melbourne, Florida to write some short stories and to write a Doctor Who episode. That was my plan. And I thought I'll work on a few different things. There's a Doctor Who episode. I'm going to make Cybermen scarier. That'll be fun. And I went off to work on all this stuff. And I started really, really missing Amanda. And when you marry a touring rock musician, you assume that there's going to be some distance. And normally, that wasn't really a problem. We'd talk, she'd get off stage or settle in for the night and give me a call or whatever, and we'd make everything work. But I hadn't encountered a wife who was making an album before. And wives making albums, I've learned, are incredibly single-minded. As far as she was concerned, she was absolutely doing her part in the relationship by sending me a text every couple of days saying, I love you, album's going great. And I started to go, I miss you. Hello. And if you're an author, you go, I could do better than sending you flowers. I'll write you a short story. That will make you love me again and distract you from your album. So that was my plan. And I started writing a short story for her and failed. And after a while, I was writing the short story, and then I was going, I don't think it's a short story. It's a novelette. And I carried on writing, and then I went, okay, it's not a novelette, it's a novella. And I sent my publisher an email saying, I'm writing a novella. I know they're really hard to publish, but just letting you know. And then Amanda finished making her album. And she went to Dallas, Texas, to mix the album. And I flew to Dallas, Texas, and I was typing from my notebooks. I'd finished handwriting this thing, and I'm typing it out. And I write some extra stuff, and I put it in, and I type out the whole thing, and I do a word count. And I send another email to my publisher saying I appear to have written a novel. And I'm really sorry. I know you weren't expecting it, and a novel. And meanwhile, it actually got to be really fun, because I would read it to Amanda. She'd come back at night from mixing her album, and I would read her what I typed that day. So by the end of her mixing, I'd read her the whole book, which was enormously fun. And so I did actually sort of get to give her my book personally. And
As an audiobook.
As an audiobook, as a self-performed audiobook. I did something that audiobooks cannot do, because when she would wake up in the morning, I could say, okay, what was the last bit that you remembered before you fell asleep?
I think
And she would tell me, and I would go back to that point, which audiobooks can't do. They don't.
But
they
they
don't.
should.
They should.
They should.
They should keep track of where you fall asleep.
Yeah.
So I got to do that, and then, and I began the book with, even when I thought it was a short story, I began it with a real thing that happened when I was a boy, but which I'd never known about, and I didn't actually know about it until I was an adult.
You're talking about the suicide?
I am. Back in 2003, I bought a Mini Cooper. I bought a Mini, and loved it. Thought, what a great car! And what I like about this car is it's proportionately bigger than the Minis were when I was a kid. So it feels exactly the same size. I've scaled up. It's scaled up. This is brilliant. And I talked to my dad, and I said, you know, I love the Mini. It's so great. Whatever happened to the Mini that we had when I was a kid? I remember, you know, one day we had a Mini, and the next day we had this horrible old giant Rover, and it smelt like leather and cigars, and it was kind of evil, and we kids hated going anywhere in it because we would get car sick, and you'd have to stop so that we could throw up. And what was the deal? And he said, have I never told you that? And I said, what is there to tell? And he said, He said, well, when you were 7 or 8, we had a lodger. And he was from South Africa. And he had smuggled money out of South Africa, because at the time you were only allowed to take out, like, you know, €100. And all of his friends had given him money to take out of South Africa, which he was meant to bank in England for them. But he didn't bank it. Instead, he went to the casino in Brighton. And he lost all his money. And then he lost all their money. And then he came back to the house in the small hours of the morning, stole our car, drove it down to the end of the lane, and committed suicide in it. He said, and I got called by the police about 5 o'clock in the morning, went down, identified the body, and sold the car that afternoon. Now, it will tell you something about me that my reaction was not what I think it should have been, which is, oh, that poor man, what a tragedy. My reaction was a sort of deep, outraged 7-year-old howl of, you mean something interesting happened when I was a kid and nobody told me? And so that sort of little thing, that weird, horrible little personal tragedy, kept sitting there in the back of my head like a little piece of grit. And I kept thinking, well, you know, there should be a story about that. I think I could put a story together, or at least just start off with that and see where it goes. And when I was about 9 years old, this will again tell you something about me, I learned that one of the farms at the end of the lane that I lived on, not actually the farm at the end of the lane, a farm halfway down the lane, was mentioned in the Doomsday Book. And the Doomsday Book was the book that William the Conqueror had assembled after he invaded England. That's just the list of everything that he owned now, having conquered England. And there was a farm mentioned there. And that was, you know, in the late 1060s. So I am 9 years old and I'm going, that farm down our lane is 1,000 years old. And of course, it didn't occur to me that it would have looked different 1,000 years ago. As far as I'm concerned, this big red brick farmhouse has been there for 1,000 years. And I thought, I wonder if the people who live there have been there for 1,000 years too. And I thought about it, and I decided they probably hadn't. But it would be really interesting if they had. So I started making up in my head a family down the end of my lane who'd lived there for 1,000 years. And pretty quickly they became called the Hempstock family. I'm not really sure why, but I liked the name and they were called Hempstocks. And I never got to write a story about them. Mostly, I think, looking back on it, because I never wrote any books or stories that were set on my lane. But every now and again, I would mention the Hempstock family. So you'll find Daisy Hempstock in Stardust, and Liza Hempstock is the witch in the Graveyard Book. And in my head, they'd sort of intermarried out. So there were Hempstocks around, but the true Hempstocks, the echt Hempstocks, they were down the end of my lane. And I thought, okay, well, I have these two elements. And I have me, and I have the Minnie, and I have the Hempstocks. And I have Amanda out there waiting for a story. And I know what she likes. I know what she doesn't like. She doesn't really like fantasy very much. Go figure.
She should meet my wife.
I thought, but she likes me, so there will be lots of me in there. She likes honesty. And because she is neither British nor male, she likes feelings. I thought, and I'm sort of going, okay, I'll put feelings in there. How hard can it be? And so that was where I began writing the story, with those sort of elements. And a willingness and an interest and an excitement just in seeing where was this going to take me.
But when you start writing the short story, even if it's for Amanda, do you already have in mind that it's going to be published? Or was it a thing for Amanda and that's it?
I don't think there's anything that I've ever finished that hasn't been published. So it's, there were, you know, there's, even when I'm writing something for myself, I know that it's going to get published somewhere, even if it's just going to be something that will be in the next short story collection. Because I did a short story collection in 1998, and I did a short story collection in 2007, and probably, you know, that coming up for one in a couple of years, and there's a huge pile of short stories. Yeah. So I'm very confident, you know, that it will be published. Yeah. The only things that I write that really are never for publication are poems. Okay. And I'll write poems, and particularly poems just for Amanda. Yeah. They're just hers. Yeah. But anything else I figure is fair game, especially a short story. Yeah. It'll be, somebody will publish it.
Well, we're both fans of Stephen King. And Stephen King, of course, has his Dark Tower series, and lots of characters from Dark Tower you find in other novels. Yeah. Do you see a sort of connectivity with the Hempstocks that at the end we're seeing in the big picture of, or is it more for fun, I put a Hempstock in it?
No, the thing, I mean, my novels, I saw a giant chart once of Stephen King novels and places and people, which is absolutely fascinating. It's a glorious, somebody did it online. It's just this wonderful chart with arrows, and you discover this character from this book appears here, and that character, and these people go to that place before this happens, and you realize it is one giant continuity. You can actually, if you are mad, do that with my stuff, but it's really kind of odd, because many of the things that glue bits of my stories together are from novels that I haven't yet written. Yeah. So I will do the thing of putting down a piece of glue and a thing.
Well, someone online will do this for you.
Well,
someone did this with the Pixar movies, saying that they're all interconnected, and if you read it, you actually believe it.
Well, and the truth is, mine kind of all are connected, but they're not really connected properly. They just all sort of, it's like they all share the same parking lot.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, you can, there are absolutely connections that demonstrate that against all reasons, Stardust and American Gods occupy the same universe, for example.
Yeah.
All I can do is apologize to people.
And I'm wondering, did you actually tell what the novel is about?
What is the novel about?
We've heard snippets and bits.
You know, I'm not sure you need more than snippets and bits. The novel is about 180 pages.
But on Kindle, it looks smaller.
I've had grumpy people who read it on Kindles and say, it's only 100 pages. And I go, no, actually, you just read it quickly. It's longer than that. It's a, what's it about? It's about memory. It's about survival. It's about magic and weirdness. It's one of my few books where I really don't like giving away too much.
Yeah.
I mean, what I've given away there is stuff from essentially the first 2 chapters. Anything after that, I would much rather it surprised you, as it will. I hope, or I'm not doing my job.
For the Dutch edition, you wrote a special foreword. He wrote it in English, but we translated it in Dutch.
Oh, that's right. Well, my cover.
One of the things that next time we're going to ask you to write it in Dutch. But one of the things that struck me is there were several reviews of the book already, and some described it as fantasy, as surrealism, as everything, and you say, well, okay, I can see that, but it's a realistic book.
One of the things that I love about the reviews that I've been getting of this book, which honestly have been fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, these are the kind of reviews you cannot buy. Normally, you need several really good, clear photographs of the reviewer in a compromising position with a farm animal.
How often do you use that joke?
Very, very rarely. It just came out. I'm sorry. No, but the truth is, you're getting these amazing, wonderful reviews. But they do have that kind of blind man and the elephant quality to them, in that you could put them all next to each other and be convinced they were describing different books. And I like that. The story of the blind man and the elephant is a fable of a bunch of blind people trying to describe an elephant to each other, and they each grab a different bit, and one grabs a leg and says, oh yes, I get it, an elephant is like a pillar, and another one grabs an ear and he's going, okay, an elephant is a lot like a fan, and one puts his hand up against the elephant's side and he says, an elephant is a lot like a wall. And those are the kind of reviews we're getting. The Times newspaper in London said that if I were South American, it would definitely be magical realism.
Without changing the book.
Without changing the book. And I just feel apologetic. You know? I feel like I should say, aha, I was fooling you all along, I'm South American. And then but I've seen reviews that look on it absolutely as a realistic novel.
Yeah.
And love that. And I've seen reviews as fantasy. There were some really interesting reviews in the US which approached it from the point of view of science fiction and drew a science fictional lineage, which was perfectly valid. And I love the ones that simply approach it from a literary point of view and say, okay, it's a literary novel and this is what he's doing and this is what he's doing with memory and this is how it works from a literary aspect. And all of those things are, it's all fair game.
Yeah.
And I love it. From my point of view, I wrote a book for my wife.
Yeah, you did.
I love, this has been the single most best-selling thing that I've ever done. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, because if you put my books together over the years, Neverwhere was never on any bestseller list at all. But it's probably sold more books in the, when did it come out, about 15 years ago? In the 16 years since it's been out, it's sold more books than most of the books that were on the bestseller lists, the months that it came out. It just sells them week after week, month after month, every week, every month, which, if you're an author, honestly, is great. And it's much more fun to have it work like that than to have a book zoom onto the bestseller list and then zoom into the remainders pile and then zoom back into darkness. So I like it my way. But Ocean at the End of the Lane has, it knocked Dan Brown off the #1 spot in America. Thank you. Only for a week. It's been in the top 10 now for 8 weeks, and every time we think, okay, it's going to drop out, it goes up again, and it's just absolutely this thing. But what I love is that it's such a weird little thing that occurred by accident, because if it was a book like American Gods or Neverwhere or even Stardust, where you could sort of point to it and you could point to what I've done and it's this huge commercial success, I know that I'd have the publisher going, could you do, Neverwhere 2? Yeah. Whatever.
Back to Stardust.
Or another Stardust, or more American Gods, or whatever. Whereas the great thing about Ocean at the End of the Lane, nobody's ever going to go, can you do it again? It's like, no, I can't do it again.
This was
Send my wife away. Yeah. We'll see what...
Well, it brings me to the Sandman Prelude you are writing.
Yeah.
And this is not for your wife, this is for 20 million readers.
It's true, it's
and
terrifying.
And they're all looking over your shoulder while you're writing, I read.
They are.
One of them.
It's the slowest thing I think I've ever written, because I get genuinely paranoid. Yeah. So, for those of you who don't know, 25 years ago, last December, Sandman #1 came out. Next December. 1988, December 88. Sandman #1 was published. And I think we sold 90,000 copies. And then that fell off very quickly. So by about issue 4, we were selling 40,000 copies. And then it was a slow climb back to 44,000, 45,000, 50,000. By number 8, we made it to sort of 55,000. And by the time it finished, we were at about 150,000. And because the entire comics market had collapsed in the meantime, but not us, we were now outselling Batman, Superman, and the X-Men, which was a bit weird. So that was 1996. And then Sandman has stayed in print ever since. And now it's the 25th anniversary. And there was one Sandman story that I hadn't told, and that I'd meant to tell. So I talked to DC Comics, and we got an amazing artist named J.H. Williams III, not to be confused with J.H. Williams I, or the second, who, as we all remember, gave their life fighting robot monsters, and it's not true. And Jim Williams is drawing it, and Dave McKean has come out of, I would say retirement, but it's not like he retired. I just wasn't writing the comic anymore. Dave McKean is doing the covers, and it's going to be fun, and it's going to be wonderful. And except that while I was writing Sandman, the most people who were reading it at any time was about 150,000 people. And that didn't make me nervous. In the intervening years, we've sold probably about 25 million copies of graphic novels. An awful lot of people have read Sandman. And now I'm writing this opening sequence, and I'm suddenly going, in my head, there's 25 million people, and they're all looking over my shoulder, and they're all going like this. Yeah? It's not very good. So it's very weird. And
I was actually flabbergasted when I read that, because I'm a writer now for 10 years, and when I started out, nobody knew who I was, so I could write anything I want, and now I'm writing the third part of a trilogy, and I have the same thing. I have people emailing when it's coming out, it's going to be any good. I hope so. But then, you are somebody I look up to as a writer, and you don't have this. And you do.
Of course.
Because you're a human being.
Absolutely. That's the weird, wonderful thing is, I'll run into people and they'll go, well, I have this problem as a writer, but you'll never have had that. And I'll go, all right.
Yeah.
You think that I, as a writer, have never got up and gone, I really need to write this. Oh, I think I'll go and put all of these spices in the spice rack into alphabetical order.
No. What we think is you get up, you look in the mirror, you say, I'm fucking Neil Gaiman. You write everything that we can't do, and then you go and hug Amanda. That's what we think.
So the day starts with I'm fucking Neil Gaiman and ends with I'm fucking Amanda Penn.
I want to go to fucking
So, and the truth is, I have great days, and some of them are like that. And I have the, oh my God, I'm going to alphabetize the spice rack. Did you see the Simpsons episode that they put me in, the book job?
No.
It is a wonderful episode mostly because Lisa Simpson has to write a book in it, and you get to see every possible mechanism that writers get to go through before they write, when they're making excuses for themselves. So, and there's one point where she needs the right music to write to, and suddenly discovers that all of her music is out of order. So she obviously needs to organize her music before she can write, and needs to find the right coffee shop.
Yes.
And
the right kind of music.
The right kind of, and the truth is, I'm lucky, I think, in a lot of ways, because when I started, I was a journalist. And the great thing about being a journalist is that you have things to write, and you have deadlines, and the deadline is like, okay, it needs to be on my desk at 3 o'clock this afternoon. And you could not turn around to the editor and say, I just I wasn't feeling it. Because I once got a phone call, a long time ago. It was an English magazine called Punch, and long since defunct, I believe. And I got a phone call from the editor of Punch saying, hi Neil, just wanted to remind you that that review that you were meant to be writing is due in tomorrow morning. And I said, no, it's not. It's due in on Tuesday. He says, yeah, it's Monday today. And oh, right. And I'm looking around trying to see the book. And I can't see the book. And I said, just out of interest, what happens if you don't get the review tomorrow? And he said, well, it's a good question, Neil. We'd have a blank page. So what I do is I put a little photograph of you on it, not very big, just a little sort of passport-sized photograph, and I put your name and your address and your phone number, and I'd let people know where they could go to find what should have been on that page. And I said, good, just no reason for asking, really. And I put down the phone and wrote a 700-word article on what you do when you have to review a book you can't find. And
so you were
gave it to them.
Even then, you already made up stories.
I was already making stuff up. So, and I presented him the following morning, and he he loved it and he printed it. But there was that sort of sense of, failure is not an option. And I love that I did come out of that tradition. And most of the time, even except possibly on the occasional days when I have to alphabetize the spice rack, I can normally stay in that place.
I hear it. We have about 5 minutes left. I'm going to do a couple of short questions, which means you have to give short answers. I ask on my blog people just come up with questions. So I'm going to. Elsa Kruse asks, "Do you read webcomics, and would you ever write one?"
Do I read webcomics? I read webcomics sometimes. What tends to happen is people will send me links to webcomics and say, this is great. And I will go off and I will binge. And I will disappear off for many, many hours and read the entire archive. Sometimes going backwards, sometimes going forwards. It's always interesting reading webcomics going backwards, and you go backwards and you go backwards, and then you go, no, I have to start at the beginning because this is too weird, and you start at the beginning. Would I ever write a webcomic? Maybe. It's not high on the list of things where I go, I really would love to write a webcomic because I don't have enough to do. On the other hand, I really wish that the web and webcomics had been around when I started writing, because it's the kind of thing I can imagine myself absolutely just going, this is so great, I will write, I'll write this thing, I'll write, one a day and
one page a day. Or
exactly, I would absolutely, I can think of nothing that would have been much more fun at that point. These days, I just have so many things that people are actually waiting for. And people, large people who have watches, who look at them and then they cough. That, I'm not sure that I could justify nipping off and writing a webcomic.
But you did a video game.
I did. That was, the video game was enormously fun, Wayward Manor. And nobody has given me shit about the title, which I love. I knew the title had to be the house, and I was just running through house names, and suddenly went Wayward Manor. That's it. And then we checked and discovered the only Wayward Manor anywhere on the web was some, intimate bondage and discipline place that you could go away for a kinky holiday to, but they seem to have closed down. So I went, okay, yes.
It's going to reopen again after the game comes out.
Some very surprised people checking in with their games.
Oh, this was supposed to be for children.
Exactly. So yes, I have been. That's really fun, because the fun thing with doing the Wayward Manor thing is mostly incredibly long phone calls, and lots of game designers on the phone, and me going, we could do this, and them going, you're mad. It's brilliant.
Yeah, but it's the thing that we talked about this afternoon, about the sandbox thing. That we live in a time where you can be more than a novelist. You can be a writer, and a writer can mean games, movies, TV series, books, graphic novels, comics.
Absolutely. And I think, for me, the writers that I looked up to when I was growing up were always people who could do everything. I thought Harlan Ellison was great because he'd write sad stuff that was sad, but his funny stuff was funny, and his journalism was good journalism, and then he'd go off and write an episode of classic Star Trek, and it would be the best episode of the whole thing. And I go, I want to do that. And Ray Bradbury, where, Bradbury would write science fiction, and then he'd write horror, and the horror would be good horror, and the science fiction would be good, beautiful, poetic, weird science fiction, and then he'd write TV, and he'd write movies, and oh my God, he wrote the screenplay to Moby Dick, was written by Ray Bradbury. I want to do that. I want to be one of those people. That was always my goal. Okay, we should do another question. Since
For one day, you are the Doctor. Who will be your companion? And don't give me Amanda. Because we all know it's going to be Amanda, so.
Okay, so If I get to be the Doctor for one whole day, and I get to pick anybody in the universe as my companion, except Amanda Palmer, obviously, I think I would like Tom Baker. The young Tom Baker as my companion. Tom Baker in his late 30s, because if the odds are very good that if you are the Doctor, even if it's only for a day, you are going to run into Daleks at some point in that day. And I figure, if Tom Baker is standing next to me, and he's got the hat on and the scarf, they will check their databases. They will start shooting at him. And it will give me a chance to get away.